Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going to start this week, as we've been doing lately, with the discussion of another episode of The Clone Wars. But Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are before we get started?
You got it, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we'll be discussing episode 8 from season 3 of the Clone Wars, which is called Evil Plans. It will be, as all of these discussions are, a full spoiler discussion. So with that having been noted, Jay, you want to go ahead and give everybody the episode summary, please?
Sure thing. When a diplomatic banquet hosted by Senator Amidala faces catastrophe when it was discovered that the Jogan fruit necessary for a dessert important to a key dessert is missing, Anakin Skywalker steps in and sends C-3PO and R2-D2 on a mission to retrieve the fruit. Along the way, C-3PO is abducted by the notorious bounty hunter Cad Bane in an attempt to acquire the floor plans to the Senate. Meanwhile, R2 enjoys an afternoon at a droid spa before Cad Bane's minions come for him. After Bane secures the information he needs, he turns it over to Jabba the Hutt and receives a new mission from the 5 Hutt families. R2 and Threepio, with their memories wiped of the afternoon's happenings, return to Senator Amidala's apartment with the Jogan fruit just in time to save the banquet.
So when I rewatched this morning, I remember when it started, like, oh yeah, this episode, I like this one. And I still like it. But after I sat down and wrote the notes, I was like, this is kind of a bizarre episode.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, but I mean, it's kind of deliciously George Lucas in some ways, but it's also, the story is just a little bizarre on this. And so, I mean, should ask you your opinion first on this, but what did you think about this overall?
Oh, I mean, the bottom line is happy wife, happy life, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there's definitely a lot of whimsy in this, and I think that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head there with very, very George Lucas feeling in that way. But obviously there was this mechanism of storytelling where the droids are front and center here. But it is a little bizarre in some ways, but not as bizarre as A Sunny Day in the Void. So, I mean,
that's
it's all
own,
good.
yeah, it's its entirely own category. But
It
just is so you get this strange confluence of events where it just so happens that Padme is throwing this banquet and she's using it as a way to lobby some other senators and get some support for this military bill that she wants to get passed. And the one person she needs to impress is a senator that really likes this dessert that has a Jogan fruit topping, which 3PO just managed not to get. So she puts it in Anakin's hands. I mean, they're almost reckless the way that they're talking to each other in this situation. Like, first of all, why is Anakin hanging out at this senator's banquet? And
Right?
two, they're talking to each other very much as a couple in this
Yes.
situation, and she's asking him to handle it. And then Anakin pulls like the dad routine by setting up 3PO and R2 to go out and do this together and not to get swindled. And it just so happens that at that time, Cad Bane's looking for the droids. And so it just is, like I said, the circumstances are just a little bit bizarre.
They are indeed, I know, and I wrote that down, like, why does Padme need a Jedi protector for this party? And you're
Mhm.
right, it's very domestic in a lot of ways, and it hit me that Padme is actually more stressed about hosting this party than she is about being in danger, as we just saw in the last episode. It's like she's freaking out over this Jogan fruit, and yet, she can handle assassination attempts on her life with a little bit less stress.
Well, and the other thing is that Anakin is talking about how to the droids that we got to get this taken care of, or I'm never going to hear the end of it from
Right.
Padme. And I'm like, when have you ever had spent enough time together for that to be a thing in this situation? And look, I don't mean to dissect the relationship, but it was a whirlwind romance. They saw each other as children, reconnected 10 years later, and got married after a few
Mhm.
days. And then ever since then, they've been stealing moments together to spend time when he's not off being a general in the Clone Wars and she's not engaged in her senatorial duties. And so this notion that they could have settled in any type of domestic tranquility where, they've developed this relationship where she nags him incessantly about certain things. I'm like, okay, sure. When did that happen? When could that possibly have happened?
That's a good point. One thing I did like about this, though, is when Anakin was speaking to 3PO, it was very reminiscent of the Phantom Menace when Anakin was talking to him, in his hovel. And I don't know, it was just I don't know if it was the tone of voice that he used or the way that he was speaking to him and kind of lecturing him about, not being swindled and make sure you do this and make sure you do that. But I thought that was handled pretty well. I liked that.
Yeah. I thought it was a little funny that Anakin goes out of his way to, tell R2 that make sure 3PO doesn't get swindled and they give him just enough credit to buy the 4 Jogan fruit they need. And then he goes out and promptly gets swindled
Right.
by this guy. I mean, he shows up and, they need Jogan fruit. The guy who's running that little shop out there is like, well, I just happen to have the only 4 on, it'll cost you 4. And then so 3PO's like, oh, fantastic. We'll take it. And he goes, well, 4 each. They say 4, I meant 8. Oh, so now it's come to 32 total. He kept upping the price on the whole thing. And so 3PO got taken for a ride there. And then they discover, because Toto, Cad Bane's droid, shows up, the droid spa. And R2-D2 cannot resist going to the spa. And they have a
Yeah.
little bit of a spat that reminded me quite a bit of how they went their separate ways on Tatooine in A New Hope.
Mhm. Yes, I thought the same thing. And I was a little surprised, and I understand, like, they had to do this for the story itself,
Mhm.
that R2 was the one that got swindled into going into, the spa kind of thing instead of 3PO, because 3PO has always been the one that has been so into the oil baths, and, of course, being a protocol droid, he's a little bit more fussy than R2.
Yeah, the thing that occurred to me is that they've kind of adopted some of the personality of their current masters in that regard. Whereas 3PO was originally Anakin's buddy after
Mhm.
and we can talk a bit about how the episode guide talks about what the Bill backstory with Anakin and 3PO is. And then R2-D2 was Padme's astromech, and they kind of got swapped. R2 now goes with Anakin on missions, and 3PO spends his time as an aide to Padme. And so R2 is kind of that free spirit, looser with the rules type that Anakin is, where 3PO is much more uptight about getting the mission done and sticking to the parameters and not deviating on things. And
Mhm.
so,
That's a good
in a
point.
way, it's kind of like, you know, there's all those jokes about how you've seen it, the memes from A New Hope where, there was these 2 droids that got, ejected with, the plans, and one's a fussy golden protocol droid, and the other one's a blue and white astromech, and Darth Vader's laughing, "Oh, oh, those are my boys," whatever. Well, these are kind of like the proxy children for Anakin
Yep,
and Padme at this point.
it's true. It's so true.
Yeah. So, but since we brought up the spa, it's
Hmm.
how is that a profitable business? I mean, I'm laughing about it just because it is a little bit of whimsy that George Lucas likes in Star Wars there. But who's sending their droids to get pampered? on these at this place.
Yeah.
How
Well,
does this?
I
How's this
guess
thing?
we've oftentimes talked about how, R2 is the family dog, and Chopper is the family cat kind of thing. So that's the way I guess I would look at it is that, just like you would take your dog, not you necessarily, but some people take their dog to get them pampered. I mean, I've seen dog spas, where they do blueberry
Sure.
facials and they do, like all the things and they get their little paws massaged and stuff. So I guess I would liken it to that.
I suppose, but I wouldn't cuddle with a piece of steel like
No.
R2-D2. I mean, you know, my dogs, I get home, they shower with me affection. They want to be petted or whatever. The droids are capable of taking care of themselves.
Mhm.
So now, they occupy a very strange place in the Star Wars galaxy, right? I mean, we've talked about this. One of the things that occurred to me is that we have a minor mind wipe of both of them in this
Yeah.
episode, and this just goes to back up everything I've ever said about there. He never deserved to have his mind wiped by Bail Organa in the movie, because even when he got kidnapped by Cad Bane and they were searching his memory banks, they were looking for the Senate floor plans. They could have discovered the Anakin and Padmé connection, but they never did. And 3PO didn't blab about it. He talked about having a prior master, and it kind of revealed that his backstory that, prior to Anakin rebuilding him, he was a protocol droid that had other jobs out there, but he didn't give away any secrets in this. And it was in fact R2-D2 who had the key information that Cad Bane needed.
Mhm. Oh, I think that C-3PO has always been very much underestimated, and we get to see exactly how much in The Rise of Skywalker,
Mhm.
when he comes through the way that he does. But, one thing that I thought about when they were torturing the droids, obviously first with C-3PO and then with R2, I get the fact that, torture is supposed to be a way for them to spill the beans kind of thing, but they're machines.
Mhm.
Why do they have to be tortured to tell you things? Can't you just like plug into the memory bank, kind of thing and get what you need yourself?
Well, they were doing both, right? I mean, they were
Right.
trying to torture their information out of 3PO and scan his memory bank. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously a plot device just to show how sinister Cad Bane is. One point he whips around and says, "I'm your worst nightmare, pal." I can't do Cad Bane's voice. I don't have but at any rate, he was proving how unsavory he is in that moment. And, you know, I guess scanning the memory also takes time, so they could just get 3PO to tell them what they wanted to know. But how does a droid recite floor plans? I mean, oh, this corridor is 60 feet long by 30 feet wide, and if it opens up into the rotunda, which is blah blah. I don't know what exactly they were hoping to accomplish with that. Yeah, the best they could do is really get the information out of his memory bank, which is what they did to R2 in that
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen droids torturing other droids. I mean, that's what EV-99 did, in Jabba's palace. And I always thought that that was a horrible thing in Return of the Jedi when we saw
Yeah,
that, in
that little
the
droid squeals as it's being turned upside down.
Yes.
Little gunk droid. Yeah, and then we get Jono or J0N0, who is based on 88, which was that droid that was turning that little gonk droid over to get tortured in Jabba's palace. So definitely a callback to that. They did invoke those type of memories with that scene there. One of the things is if you watch the episode guide, you get to see how much input Anthony Daniels had on the script. And
Yeah.
he was sitting right next to Dave Filoni, and they filmed it going over 3PO's lines, figuring out what would 3PO say in that situation. So it was kind of fun seeing Anthony Daniels really being the steward of 3PO and his legacy and what is he and the character for that matter.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's awesome because Anthony Daniels is C-3PO, and he even wrote a whole book, I Am C-3PO.
Yeah.
So, it's obvious that who else would you ask? And I'm so tickled that that's part of the lore and the history of this episode specifically.
Well, it's not only who else would you ask, is like who would you ask for any particular character? I
Sure.
suspect Sam Witwer gets to put some input on Darth Maul
Mhm, mhm.
as of late, but he's the only one that's really had a significant amount of lines for Darth Maul. Whereas like a bunch of people done Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, and I don't even know that Ewan McGregor would be interested in coming in and like doctoring all of Obi-Wan's lines at this point. And James Arnold Taylor is a voice actor. He's not so much the writer on this. Love his work, but he has a job. He does his job. But we've seen Anthony Daniels in conventions and stuff like that. He takes that character to heart in a way that a lot of actors don't particularly take a particular role to heart. So good for him.
True. Yep.
So one of the things we were talking about during our last Clone Wars conversation is how is it that all these people would be able to be contacted by Zero the Hutt while he was in prison in order to make these contacts? And so the question is still kind of unresolved with Aurra Sing, but it's important to note that this episode takes place before the last episode of season 1, where Cad Bane invades the Senate and holds the senators hostage so they can bust Zero out. And it's all organized by Jabba the Hutt because he knows that Zero's got information that's dangerous to the rest of the Hutt families. I love this development. What did you think?
Oh yeah. And I think I want to say it's the first time we've actually seen all the Hutt families, as far as all together as one in the holocron or holographs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, because I was thinking about that with Return of the Jedi. We never knew that there was such a diverse population of Hutts out there, and what their influence runs so deep.
Uh-huh. And so, and I love that the fact that like a couple of them were based off of like gangsters, the Godfather and stuff like that we've seen in other movies.
Mhm.
But Jabba just, calls them all up and says, this is something we got to do. And I got the information we need to make it happen. And the rest of the Hutts go along. I also love the fact that Cad Bane is waiting in the shadows and he commandeered the protocol droid to translate for him. So he knew exactly what was going on there. So he could maximize his fee for doing that job because he knows he's really the only one capable of doing it.
My Hutt tease is very rusty, or whatever he said.
My ancient Hutt tease. Yeah.
Yes.
But no, I like that idea that it's not so much that Zero is some mastermind and has all these contacts at the outside. It's that Jabba knows that with Zero in prison, he could turn state's evidence against the Hutts and create problems for them. So it's worth his time to get him out of there. And then we've got an episode that's coming up in the future where something's going to be done about Zero once he's out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said before, Zero is he's a horrible gangster. I mean, as far as gangsters go, he is not very good at it.
No. But again, we have another episode that's out of place in the timeline. And also, we're continuing the streak where either Anakin or Obi-Wan don't appear or they show up as minor characters again. And I guess I never really just sat down and watched this stretch of the Clone Wars, just binged it this way to realize how far they strayed away from using those two characters in season 3.
Did. Yeah.
And it's really kind of surprised me. I get the interest in wanting to tell these other stories and stuff like that, but I'm just a little surprised that they didn't give us more of Obi-Wan and Anakin, going back for like 6 episodes now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I guess I didn't realize how big of a stretch it was either.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we were saying last week, and you pointed this out, is that it really does leave us thirsting for those stories. And I definitely feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we've got some big developments coming for Obi-Wan in the later half of this season.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited for that. But at the same time, it's just a little weird. We talked about with that Mandalorian arc that focused on Satine and a bit of Padme and a little bit of Ahsoka on there. And my preference would have been to have that closer to the other Mandalorian episodes to give all of them more weight in that moment, as opposed to telling these stories almost as an afterthought. This is the prequel to that episode where Cad Bane sneaks into the Senate and then, he has a fight with Anakin Skywalker, and that's great. But I would have loved to seen this episode the week before we got that one. And I think it would have been made a bigger impact on both episodes that way.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons why, as much as we were saying with the new mall series that's coming out, that it's going to be sequential. That
Mhm.
is, for me, I like that just because it's easier to follow. But I get the compact, arcs here and there, and you can tell a complete story. But then again, it's so disjointed in a lot of ways that, yeah, it's hard for, okay, now when did this one happen? And where in the timeline is this supposed to be? And, oh yeah, this one happened before as you said, the Senate kidnappings and hostage situation, all that kind
Right.
of stuff.
Yeah, the hostage crisis episode.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just Star Wars fans that are nerds about this, like us, put two and two together. But I could see this being
Sure.
confusing for other
Oh yeah.
people. And especially since here's the other thing that goes completely skipped over. Toto, that little droid that Cad Bane has, is voiced by Seth Green, has been destroyed on screen in this
Mm-hmm.
series.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea, if you're just watching this casually, well, wait a minute, did this episode become before where he was destroyed or after, or what happened?
Right. Yeah.
And the episode guide points out in the trivia section that Anakin actually rebuilt Toto in order to try and figure out where Cad Bane was. But things went awry and Toto got away and Cad Bane reacquired him. We get that
Yes.
story nowhere else
Mhm.
other than a trivia guide. And that kind of, how big of a deal is it? I guess not a super big deal in the long run, but it does create a little bit of confusion.
Oh yeah, for sure. It is kind of a big deal, quite honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what else? Anything else from this episode stand out to you?
Well, one of the things that I had written down here was with the memory wipe
Uh-huh.
is, when they go back and they, bring back the Jogan fruit and everything is saved the day. But then Anakin is asking 3PO about what happened. He's like, it's rather odd. I can't remember what happened throughout wouldn't you think that Anakin would be like, this needs to be looked into, but he just kind of like brushes it off.
He's so happy that Padme's
Yeah,
happy that
exactly. Happy
no
wife,
big
happy life.
deal. What
Yeah,
possibly could have gone wrong on all of this?
yeah,
And he also spends more time thinking about the fact that 3PO is wandering around repeating the compliment, because Padme said, "Oh, magnificent job." And then 3PO just wanders around like everybody he sees, sentient droid, whatever. Magnificent job.
right.
Magnificent job. Magnificent job. And it's like, smack him. He's stuck. He's repeating himself. The Neil skipping here. Do something about this. And then Anakin's just like, oh, we're gonna be hearing about this for a while. And so getting back into that domestic tranquility situation that I was talking about earlier. It's, when do you spend enough time ever with 3PO for this to be a thing? But
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, no, again, it's a fun episode. Like I said at the beginning, it's just a little bit bizarre in there. It's a prequel to something that happened in season 1, and it's fine. That's one of the things that they aim to do in Star Wars, was just tell all these different stories, and they jump back and forth, and it doesn't bother them that they do it this way. But it's not like anything that comes after this sequentially. The way things were released actually relies upon this episode.
Mhm.
So it would have been nice if they just could have found a way to make sure that people could tie it in a little bit easier to the stuff that aired before it, but happens after it.
No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, then I think that's all we've got to say about this episode. So thank you all for joining us on this episode of Podcast Stardust as we continue to go through our rewatch of the Clone Wars. We hope you've been enjoying it if you've been around with us long. And if so, and you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And if you're new to the show, welcome. And I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. And if you're interested in more episodes of our Clone Wars rewatch, which we are doing on Mondays right now, again, subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We're pretty much available everywhere. And if I'm not on your podcatcher of choice, let me know, and I'll do what I can to get us on that platform. Another great place you can check out the show is over at retrozap.com. The entire back catalog is there, all previous 993 shows, as well as all the other great shows on the network, such as Enjoy Stuff and the Superhero Suite and the work that Jay and Josh are doing. It's really fantastic. So a couple other shows a little bit more dormant right now, but they got a lot of great back episodes that you can find over there on the network. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found online?
Yes, we are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust. And you can always check out our Pinterest boards and our 2 YouTube outlets, which includes the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So please head over to both of those, like, subscribe, share those out. And we are literally on every other streaming platform available as well. So that also includes Audible and Spotify. And if we're not somewhere that you typically listen to podcasts, let us know. Dennis is awesome about getting us everywhere. And so you can drop us a line at podcaststardust@gmail.com to let us know that, or you can just let us know what you think of this episode or any others. And we'd also love some questions. We are just about ready to record our 1000th episode. And so if you email us at podcaststardust@gmail.com, we will definitely address those questions and have fun with that episode. And then last but not least, we have our TeePublic store where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs on a lot of different things, from t-shirts and sweatshirts to coffee mugs and lots of other products. And every single one of those purchases does help to support the show, and we really appreciate that. So once again, that would be TeePublic, and the link to that is in our show notes.
All right, Jay, I know a comeback in cosplay is in the works. What is the latest?
Yes. So at j.snips cosplay on Instagram is where you can find me and my cosplay. And you can find me as Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, as well as 2 different versions of Hera, the fourth sister, my original concept Mandalorian, as well as some other things as well. So I'm really excited about this coming spring, and I've got some things in the works. And so once again, check all that out at j.snips cosplay.
All right, upcoming on the show, we're really excited for this. On Wednesday, it is the first installment in the Darth Bane Path of Destruction book club, where we'll be talking about the prologue and chapters 1 through 3. And I've heard from a lot of you that are really interested in this series. So you can find it on Wednesday, get those 32 pages knocked out so you'll be ready for the conversation, and we can't wait to bring it to you. Then on Friday, we are breaking the mold, just like James Mangold, apparently, with Dawn of the Jedi. See our last episode for that discussion. But we are bringing World Between Worlds, the monthly segment where Jay breaks down recent lifestyle and fashion finds in the Star Wars galaxy for us, so that she can get you ready in time for Valentine's Day. So we got 2 monthly features coming up this week. So yeah, make sure you're around for those. All right. Thanks for listening to episode 994 Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.